these 10 different categories of abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction have tremendous long-term effects upon the social, emotional, and physical welfare of our children. We're going to take a look during the course of this series on what these significant impacts are, how you can recognize them in your life, and how you can begin to take steps to remediate that overexcited nervous system, and how you can begin to calm yourself, and how you can begin to trust God with every detail of your life. As a person's ACE score increases, so does the likelihood of these various physical problems, whether it's alcoholism, drug abuse, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, liver disease, lung disease, heart disease, ischemic heart attacks, STDs, unwanted pregnancies. Literally, the list goes into the hundreds of physical and emotional issues, problems that are directly connected to adverse childhood experiences. I'd like you to notice the connection and the progression of adverse childhood experiences into behavior-related and health-related problems. Here's the ACE pyramid. It's in your notes. Notice the progression, if you will, please. It goes from the bottom to the top. The bottom begins at conception, and the top goes to death. It begins with adversity early in a child's life. Remember, stress can affect a child in the womb and can actually begin to change the mental and physical architecture of a child. The brain and the nervous system architecture is affected by nervousness. Bathing the body and the nervous system in cortisol, in adrenaline. All of this affects the architecture, the size and the shape, and the wiring of the brain and nervous system. So a child experiences adversity. That results in social, emotional, and cognitive impairment. Impairment, what do we mean by impairment? Well, if I said, hey, I want you to run a 50-yard dash, and by the way, here's a 10-pound sack of sand to put around your leg. Well, you could run the 50-yard dash, but you would be impaired. You couldn't run it as quickly. In the same way, children who grow up being physically, sexually, or emotionally abused have the potential to become emotionally impaired, meaning that their emotions are subject to vast swings, going from one extreme, one side of the pendulum, to the other side of the pendulum, and swinging from one side to another side with little ability to moderate your emotions. Children who grow up being physically, sexually, or emotionally abused can become socially impaired. They don't know how to interpret the cues of other people, their facial expressions. They don't know how to respond socially. So sometimes they respond in an inappropriate manner. Sometimes they are cognitively impaired. I do work for a local high school, and 2 days a week I'm there to be an intervention specialist. And I work with teens, most of whom come from a high ACE background, and many of them are struggling cognitively in their schoolwork, and it's not their fault. They're going to school with a very high level of emotions, a high level of anxiety, a high level of fear. I was teaching one class at a local community high school. This teenager, a large Hispanic boy, was acting very irregular that day, quite agitated. And I looked at him and I said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "Well, I know my dad's going to be home when I get home from school today. And I don't know if he's going to be drunk. I don't know if he's going to be loaded. I don't know if he's going to be beating on Mom, or I don't know if he's going to be beating on me." Now let me ask you, do you think he cared about what the state capital of North Dakota was that day? Do you think he cared about World War II or history or math or social studies or science or English? He couldn't care about that because the chemicals running through his brain produce what is called toxic stress syndrome. And it is literally that these chemicals are so permeating this child's brain and nervous system that he cannot learn. It's not a matter of not wanting to learn. He cannot learn. He has difficulty sitting down, difficulty paying attention, difficulty being still. He has difficulty learning how to properly respond to others, particularly the teacher's emotions, and how to get social cues to know what is appropriate. And so what happens is he becomes labeled with all kinds of initials after his name: ADHD, bipolar, sometimes, and I think the worst one is ODD, oppositional defiant disorder. Why anybody would call their kid ODD, odd. That's not fair to a kid. When really, he's none of that. He's just a kid who grew up in a stress-filled life.